My father locked me in a cabin to teach me a lesson. But he didn't expect this ending. I'm still alive because my father made one mistake. He thought locking me inside an abandoned hunting cabin for 3 days would finally teach me respect. He didn't know someone else was already hiding in those woods. By the time the sheriff found us, my father wasn't begging them to save me. He was begging them not to believe what I was about to say. My name is Ethan Brooks, and if you think parents can't destroy their own children without leaving obvious scars, then you've never met my father. Long before the police lights flashed through the pine trees. Long before my family stopped defending him. And long before he realized fear can turn into something far more dangerous. There was one sentence that ruled my entire childhood. Don't make me look weak. Dad never shouted those words. He whispered them. Somehow, that was worse. Every morning before school, before church, before birthday parties, before family dinners. He would kneel in front of me, straighten my shirt, force a smile onto my face with 2 fingers pressed against my cheeks, and quietly say, "People are always watching, Ethan. If you embarrass me, they win." I didn't even know who they were. Neighbors. Teachers. Cashiers. Relatives. To Dad, everyone was secretly waiting for him to fail. And somehow, I became the reason he believed they would. When I was 7, I spilled orange juice at breakfast. He didn't yell. He calmly took my favorite toy truck outside. I watched through the kitchen window while he crushed it beneath the tire of his pickup. "You caused the mess," he said. "Now you learn that mistakes cost something." When I was 9, I forgot one line during the Christmas play. The audience barely noticed. Dad did. On the drive home, he made me repeat that line. Again. 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 For nearly 2 hours. Whenever I stumbled, he slapped the steering wheel so hard I jumped. You think people forget? No. They remember weakness forever. By the time I turned 12, I stopped making friends. Not because I didn't want any. Because friends laughed. They joked. They were loud. Dad hated loud. One afternoon, my classmate Noah invited me to his birthday party. It was the first invitation I'd received all year. When Dad read it, he folded it in half. Then again. Then tore it into tiny pieces. You don't need distractions. You need discipline. The next Monday everyone talked about laser tag, pizza, and birthday cake. I lied. I said I had been sick. Noah looked disappointed. He never invited me anywhere again. Every year my world became smaller. School. Home. Silence. Repeat. The strange thing was, Dad wasn't cruel all the time. Sometimes he'd buy me hot chocolate after school. Sometimes he'd take me fishing. Sometimes he'd ask about my grades and tell me he was proud. Those moments confused me more than the punishments. Because they made me believe maybe this time things were changing. Then something tiny would happen. I'd answer too slowly. I'd laugh too loudly. I'd leave muddy footprints near the back door. And suddenly the father who bought me hot chocolate disappeared. Another man stood in his place. Cold. Careful. Always smiling while he punished me. That smile frightened me more than yelling ever could. People think abusive parents are angry all the time. Some are. Mine wasn't. Mine looked perfectly calm. One Saturday afternoon he invited several coworkers over for a barbecue. Everything had to be perfect. The lawn. The grill. The music. Even the way I stood. Before the guests arrived, he adjusted my collar. If anyone asks, he whispered, tell them you love helping around the house. I nodded. Because saying anything else wasn't an option. The afternoon went smoothly until one of Dad's coworkers laughed and said, Ethan, I bet your dad spoils you. Without thinking. I smiled. He doesn't really let me play much. The backyard became silent. Not because what I said was shocking. Because it was true. Dad laughed louder than everyone else. Kids, he said. They always exaggerate. Everyone laughed with him. The conversation moved on. But I saw it. Just for 1 second. The smile disappeared from his face. His eyes locked onto mine. Empty. Flat. Like I'd just signed my own sentence. That night he didn't punish me. Not immediately. He waited until every dish was washed. Until every guest had gone home. Until the entire neighborhood was quiet. Then he opened the garage door. Come here. Inside sat an old wooden crate. He pointed at it. Get in. I stared at him. Dad. I said get in. The crate barely fit my body. When I curled into it, he closed the lid. Darkness swallowed everything. At first I thought it was another one of his lessons. 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Then I heard the click of a padlock. Dad? No answer. Only footsteps walking away. I stayed inside so long my legs cramped. I couldn't tell if it had been 1 hour. Or 5. I screamed until my throat burned. No one came. When he finally opened it, the first thing he asked wasn't whether I was okay. He looked straight into my eyes and calmly said, So, have you learned what happens when you make me look weak? I nodded immediately. Not because I had learned. Because I wanted air. Because I wanted light. Because I wanted out. I thought that was the worst thing he would ever do to me. I had no idea that less than a month later, he would drive me deep into Blackwood Forest. Leave me inside an abandoned hunting cabin. Lock the door from the outside. And disappear. The drive to Blackwood Forest lasted almost 3 hours. Dad never turned on the radio. He never asked if I was hungry. He simply kept both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead as towering pine trees swallowed the highway. I sat quietly in the passenger seat. Years of living with him had taught me one thing. Silence was safer than questions. Every few miles he glanced at me. Not with anger. With disappointment. Like I had already failed some invisible test. Finally he spoke. You embarrassed me. I swallowed. I'm sorry. You made those people think I'm a bad father. I didn't mean to. He cut me off. Intentions don't matter. Results do. His voice stayed perfectly calm. That calmness made my stomach twist. Whenever Dad stopped yelling, something worse usually followed. The road narrowed until asphalt became gravel. Cell service disappeared. No houses. No traffic. Nothing except endless trees stretching toward gray clouds. I had never been that deep into the mountains before. The truck finally stopped beside a weathered hunting cabin. Its windows were boarded up. The roof sagged under years of rain. A rusted chain hung from the front porch. The place looked forgotten. Dad climbed out and motioned for me to follow. This cabin belonged to your grandfather. I looked around nervously. Why are we here? He unlocked the front door. You need time to think. Inside smelled like mold and wet wood. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight. There was an old cot. A cracked table. A bucket in one corner. And nothing else. No electricity. No running water. My heartbeat sped up. Dad. He placed a backpack on the table. Inside were 2 bottles of water. A loaf of bread. A jar of peanut butter. And a flashlight. At first, I thought we were camping. Then he reached into his pocket. I heard metal keys. Then another sound. A heavy padlock. My chest tightened. Dad. His eyes finally met mine. You keep telling people how hard your life is. So now you'll see what hard actually looks like. He stepped backward toward the door. I followed. He raised one hand. Stay. My voice cracked. I said I'm sorry. You don't understand. I'll never say anything like that again. He shook his head. No. Apologies only matter after consequences. He walked outside. The door slammed shut. 1 second later. Metal scraped against metal. Click. The padlock. I rushed to the window. The wooden boards covered almost everything except one narrow gap. Dad. I'll be good. I promise. He never looked back. The truck engine started. Gravel sprayed beneath the tires. Within seconds, the sound disappeared into the forest. Then, nothing. Absolute silence. I stood frozen. Maybe he was trying to scare me. Maybe he'd return in 5 minutes. 10. An hour passed. The sun slowly drifted lower. He never came back. For the first time in my life, I realized I was completely alone. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was alive. Branches scraped across the roof. Wind squeezed through tiny cracks in the walls. Somewhere outside, something moved through the leaves. I tried opening the door. Locked. I searched every window. Boarded shut. My breathing became uneven. No phone. No way home. No idea where I even was. I forced myself to stay calm. Dad always said panic made people weak. I counted the food. If I ate carefully, maybe it would last several days. That thought hit me harder than anything else. Several days. He hadn't planned to come back tonight. Night arrived quickly beneath the thick forest canopy. The flashlight barely pushed back the darkness. Every strange sound became something terrifying. An owl. A snapping branch. Leaves rustling. Once, I heard footsteps. Slow. Crunch. 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 They circled the cabin. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped directly outside the wall. Someone, or something, was standing only a few feet away. I grabbed the flashlight like it could somehow protect me. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed against the front door. Knock. 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 My entire body locked up. Dad? No answer. Only silence. Then another knock. This time, from the window beside me. I spun around so fast the flashlight slipped from my hands. It rolled across the floor. Darkness swallowed the room. A voice, barely louder than a whisper, came from outside. Don't make a sound. It wasn't my father's voice. It wasn't a ranger. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The whisper came again. He's still watching. Every hair on my arms stood up. I slowly stepped toward the narrow gap between the wooden boards. Outside, hidden between two massive pine trees, a man wearing an old camouflage jacket was staring directly at the cabin. He lifted one finger to his lips, then pointed, not at me, toward the hill where Dad's truck had disappeared. I followed his finger. Far away, almost impossible to see, a pair of binoculars reflected a flash of sunlight. My father had never actually left. He was watching the cabin from the top of the ridge. My father hadn't left. He had driven just far enough to make me believe I was alone. Now he was sitting somewhere on the ridge with binoculars, watching every move I made. My stomach turned. This wasn't punishment anymore. It was an experiment. The man hidden between the trees kept his finger against his lips. He slowly shook his head, warning me not to react. I forced myself to step away from the window. A few seconds later, another knock echoed against the cabin. 3 slow taps. Exactly like before. Only this time, I understood. The stranger wasn't trying to scare me. He was trying to communicate without letting my father know he was there. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The daylight faded until the forest became nothing but dark shapes. Eventually, another whisper slipped through the narrow gap in the boards. Is he your father? I hesitated, then answered as quietly as I could. Yes. A long silence followed. Finally the man spoke again. How long has he been doing this? I don't know. He locked me in. I can't get out. Another pause. Then something unexpected. I've seen him before. Every muscle in my body tightened. What? He comes here almost every month. I stopped breathing. What do you mean? I hunt these woods. I've watched that truck drive in several times. I always thought he was checking the property. The stranger looked toward the hill again before continuing. Now I know I was wrong. A chill spread through my body. This wasn't the first time. How many times had Dad come here before? Had he done this to someone else? Or had he been planning it for years? The stranger crouched lower behind the bushes. My name is Daniel. I'm staying at an old campsite half a mile east. I'll help you. Hope rushed through me so suddenly it almost hurt. You can open the door? He looked at the heavy padlock. I can. But not while he's watching. We both glanced toward the ridge. The tiny reflection from the binoculars flashed again. Dad hadn't moved. He was patient. Watching. Waiting. Daniel whispered. If I walk over there now, he'll know. So we wait until dark. For the next 2 hours I sat on the old cot. Every minute felt longer than the last. Outside, the forest slowly disappeared beneath the night. At some point, the reflection vanished. Daniel returned. This time he carried bolt cutters. He moved carefully through the darkness, avoiding every dry branch. When he reached the porch, he crouched beside the lock. Ready? I nodded. The cutters closed around the metal. One squeeze. Nothing. He adjusted his grip. Another squeeze. The old padlock snapped with a sharp metallic crack. Both of us froze. Silence. No truck. No footsteps. No shouting. Daniel slowly opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. Come on. I stepped outside for the first time in hours. My legs trembled. The forest felt impossibly large. We have to move. He led me away from the cabin without using a flashlight. Your father knows these woods. So we stay off the trails. We walked for nearly 20 minutes. Branches scratched my arms. Roots caught my shoes. Finally, we reached a small campsite hidden beside a creek. There was a faded green tent, a fire pit, and an old pickup truck parked beneath camouflage netting. Daniel handed me a bottle of water. Drink. I emptied half of it in seconds. When can we call the police? His expression changed. No signal. He held up his phone. Nothing. The nearest highway is over 15 miles away. My heart sank. So what do? We leave before sunrise. He'll check that cabin in the morning. He can't find us here. For the first time that day, I almost believed everything would be okay. Daniel gave me a blanket and pointed toward the tent. Try to sleep. I'll stay awake. I lay down. Exhaustion pulled at my body. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad locking that cabin. Smiling. Certain I would obey. Sometime after midnight, Daniel suddenly grabbed my shoulder. His voice was barely audible. Ethan. Wake up. I opened my eyes immediately. What? He pointed toward the trees. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a tiny white beam swept across the forest. Another. Then another. Flashlights. Several of them. Moving slowly between the pines. Daniel's face turned pale. That's impossible. They found us. Before I could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the darkness. Calm. Cold. Exactly the way I remembered. Ethan. I know you're out there. You've made this much worse than it had to be. Then another voice joined him. Not one. Not two. Several men. Helping him search. My father hadn't come back alone. He had convinced people I had run away. And now they were hunting me through the forest. My father wasn't searching for me. He was hunting me. The beams of 6 flashlights cut through the darkness, weaving between towering pines. I crouched beside Daniel behind a fallen log, barely daring to breathe. Dad's voice echoed through the trees. Ethan. You don't have to be afraid. We're taking you home. Home. That word made my stomach twist. Daniel looked toward the lights. Stay here. No, I whispered, grabbing his sleeve. He'll see you. He already knows someone helped you. Daniel hesitated, then slowly nodded. The search party moved closer. I could hear boots crushing branches. Someone called out, Richard. We found footprints. Dad answered immediately. They're fresh. Keep moving. His voice sounded calm. Confident. Like a loving father trying to rescue his frightened son. No one searching with him knew the truth. Daniel leaned close. When they get closer, you tell them everything. What if they don't believe me? He looked me straight in the eyes. They will. You just have to survive long enough to speak. A flashlight suddenly swept across the creek. Daniel pulled me lower. The beam lingered only a second before moving away. Then, a loud crack echoed through the forest. One of the volunteers had stepped through rotten wood. Everyone turned toward the noise. It was our chance. Run, Daniel whispered. We sprinted deeper into the woods. Branches whipped against my face. My lungs burned. behind us came shouting. There! They're moving! Dad's voice exploded across the forest. Ethan! Stop running! He's dangerous. For a split second, I thought he meant Daniel. Then I realized. He meant me. He had convinced them I wasn't escaping. He had convinced them I was unstable. Panicked. Confused. Someone who needed to be caught. The chase became chaos. Flashlights bounced everywhere. People shouted over one another. Then, a sharp whistle pierced the night. Another. And another. Blue and red lights suddenly flashed through the trees. Sheriff's deputies. Daniel stopped so abruptly I nearly ran into him. What happened? He smiled for the first time. I left a satellite emergency beacon in my truck. When your father started the search, it automatically sent my location. The first deputy reached us seconds later. He raised both hands. Sheriff's office. Nobody move. Daniel immediately stepped forward. I'm the one who called. This kid needs help. The deputy looked at me. My clothes were filthy. My hands shook uncontrollably. There were bruises on my wrists from trying to force open the cabin door. What happened? Before I could answer, Dad burst through the trees. There he is. He hurried toward us, breathing hard. My son. He reached for my shoulder. I flinched so violently that I stumbled backward. Every deputy noticed. Dad froze. Then forced a worried smile. He's been having emotional problems. I've been trying to help him. Daniel stepped between us. No. You locked him in that cabin. Dad laughed. What? That's ridiculous. We were camping. The deputies looked uncertain. Dad knew exactly how to sound reasonable. He pointed at me. He's confused. He ran away. I've been terrified. One deputy turned toward me. Ethan. Is that true? My mouth went dry. For years, I had protected my father. Covered for him. Made excuses. Said every bruise came from falling. Every punishment was my fault. Dad looked directly into my eyes. Not angry. Warning me. The same silent warning I'd obeyed my entire life. Don't make me look weak. Then I noticed something. Daniel wasn't looking at Dad. He was looking at the sheriff. And slowly, he handed him a small device. A trail camera. I forgot it was attached to the tree outside the cabin. Dad's face lost every trace of color. The sheriff removed the memory card. Within seconds, the tiny screen displayed exactly what had happened. Dad unloading the backpack. Locking the cabin from the outside. Testing the padlock twice. Looking directly toward the woods. And driving away. No camping. No misunderstanding. No accident. Only evidence. The sheriff looked up. Richard Brooks. Turn around. Dad didn't move. There has to be some mistake. The sheriff repeated himself. Turn around. For the first time in my life. My father looked afraid. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He looked at me instead of the deputies. Ethan. I did all of this because I love you. The words hung in the cold night air. I stared at him for several seconds. Then quietly answered. No. You did it because you loved control. Silence filled the forest. Even the volunteers lowered their heads. Nobody defended him. Nobody argued. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Doctors photographed every bruise. A child protection investigator stayed beside my bed for hours. She never rushed me. She simply asked, "When did it start?" I answered honestly. I don't remember a time when I wasn't scared. The investigation uncovered years of abuse. Teachers admitted they had noticed. Neighbors confessed they had heard shouting. Relatives remembered strange punishments but convinced themselves it wasn't their business. Everyone had seen pieces. No one had put them together. Daniel testified about the cabin. The trail camera footage became the strongest evidence. A few months later, the court stripped Dad of custody. He was convicted for child abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment. I never returned to that house. I moved in with my Aunt Melissa 2 counties away. The first night she asked if I wanted more mashed potatoes. Without thinking, I asked, "Am I allowed?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quietly placed the entire bowl in front of me. "You never have to ask permission to eat in this house." I cried harder over that bowl of potatoes than I had the night my father locked me in the cabin. Because fear had taught me food had to be earned. Safety taught me it never should have been. Healing wasn't fast. I still woke up from nightmares. I still apologized when I dropped a spoon. I still froze whenever someone whispered my name. But little by little, those habits faded. Years later, I drove past Blackwood Forest one last time. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The cabin was just wood. The prison had never been the cabin. It had been my father's control. And the day I finally told the truth, that prison disappeared forever. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this to the channel.